Good morning. Welcome all. Welcome to this fifth episode of Hazards Out, our project together with FEAD, the Waste Management Federation, ACR Plus, the representatives of municipalities, and Hazardous Waste Europe, representing the hazardous waste management sector as well. Building both topics and community around the topics around household hazardous waste. And today, we'll be looking at communicating to citizens. And, so far you could say we have looked mostly at the hazardous part of household hazardous waste. Today, we'll be looking much more at the household part and what it will take to actually connect with citizens and households to make sure that they understand proper management of their hazardous waste at home, but also how do you communicate and raise awareness with them on what are the best mechanisms to sort, collect, and actually do something with this material as well. You never know. There's so much that needs to be done, so many waste streams to be taken care of. And it can probably be very overwhelming for citizens and households. So in today's episode, we'll be hearing about various activities that have tried to make that as simple as possible for households, and also we'll be trying to understand some of the levers that are important when communicating to citizens. So our agenda today. We'll be looking at three different case studies, if you will, three different presentations with Carol Sweeten from Ireland, from Limerick. We will also have Stephanie Painsith from Austria and Mario Ramos giving us, in fact, an academic perspective with a piece of research focusing on Portugal. And together with these three speakers, we'll be, expanding, I think, very much our knowledge of what it will take to convince and engage citizens in, doing the right thing when it comes to household hazardous waste. As usual, after these three presentations, we'll encourage you to raise your questions, both in the chat, but also you'll have the opportunity to raise your hand, turn on your camera, your microphone, and engage in a conversation with our speakers. So we hope you will take that opportunity up. At the end of the day, we're trying to put together some great content for you, and the best way for you is to engage with that content. So please, definitely engage with our speakers today. Before I actually open the agenda, I would also like to mention that at the end of April, the partners of Hazards Out, together with ISWA, the International Solid Waste Association, as well as EERA, the European Electronics Recyclers Association, published a joint declaration on household hazardous waste. Now, I believe that you are probably part of the community of people who will consider that this is a very important topic, but we also know it's not necessarily on the radar of policymakers at all different levels. And so if you feel that household hazardous waste is not getting sufficient priority attention, you might be interested in looking at this joint declaration and maybe sharing it more widely with your network. What we try to do with this declaration is basically say that the circular economy, it's not all about tonnages. There is a bit of a focus on tonnages usually because we need to move material, up the waste hierarchy as much as possible. On the other hand, there are also materials and substances out there that need to be treated with caution. And household hazardous waste is one of those. And even if it represents only 1%, we estimate, of municipal waste, nevertheless, it's a highly important 1% because it can have a very important impact or effect on other waste streams if not managed and sorted correctly. So our goal here was to raise a bit of awareness and attention on the issue. It's a declaration that's been built on all the different episodes and webinars we have already produced last year, and it's building on all of this accumulated knowledge that you can also find on the Hazards Out website. And essentially, it highlights four important points. One is that we think we still have insufficient data and understanding on this waste stream, not enough material characterization. So we need more support on that. We also need to talk about overall costs, and it is a a big cost to manage this type of waste, and this cost, someone needs to pay for it, and so the financial aspect of this waste stream is I think of policy importance, and we're really raising attention on that. On the topic of today, how do we strengthen communication to households and citizens so that they understand the importance of making sure they're treating their household hazardous waste separately? And then finally, also a point on training and skills. We've realized that there's probably quite some work to be done in order to, make sure that, both households, but also then all the operators from the municipal level and further down the chain are, well trained to manage these streams. There are very different types of substances that you need to understand, and we're not all chemists, and yet we probably should be all chemists when we're dealing with this type of waste. So we feel that this is also something that will require some investment and attention. So if you wish to help us, raise awareness on household hazardous waste, please take ownership of this declaration, and please share it widely with your networks. Just quickly to introduce you to you. So we have received 78 registrations today for this episode, and with representation from different parts of the value chain, let's say, mostly coming from the waste management sector. But we're also pleased to see that we're getting traction with public authorities as well. Ultimately, public authorities will be a very, very important player in making the link right between the households and the waste management system. So regardless of the sector that you're in, we're looking forward to hearing your comments and questions. And we also have registrations coming from 30 different countries, so it's a broad spectrum. And again, I think your geographies will also be highly interesting to us to get different perspectives on how you approach your communication to citizens and households. So please share your different views with us today. We'll be looking forward to hearing them. So on that note, I propose then that we get started. Our first case study will take us then to Limerick with Carol Sweetnam. She is Senior Executive Scientist at the Southern Regional Waste Management Planning Office of the Republic of Ireland. Great to have you with us, Carol. And in fact, your case study is almost taking us where we left off, actually, because where we left off at the previous episode was a presentation from ENVA in Ireland, talking about some of the aspects related to how they're managing household hazardous waste. But they did actually mention something around collection days in Ireland. So really keen to hear a little bit more about that. So Carol, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. Good morning, everybody. As I said, my name is Carol Sweetnam, and I'm based in the Southern Regional Waste Management Planning Office. So today, I'm just going to give so first of all, just a brief summary of how we manage waste management planning in Ireland, and then just talk briefly about the local authorities' role in household hazardous waste collection, and then how we collect the waste here in Ireland and our household hazardous waste collection days, which Inva would have spoken about at the last meeting. So just starting off, I suppose, just to explain, in terms of waste management planning, there's 31 local authorities in Ireland, and the 31 local authorities are divided into 3 waste regions. So we have the Connacht Ulster region, which is up here in the northwest. We have the Eastern Midlands, which is here in yellow, and the Southern region. So each region is supported by a regional waste management planning office, and I'm based in the Southern Regional Waste Management Planning Office. And the Regional Waste Management Planning Offices, together, we coordinate the implementation in terms of waste management planning on behalf of the local authorities in Ireland. And in 2024, we published our National Waste Management Plan for a Circular Economy on behalf of the local authorities in Ireland. So I suppose, what are the drivers for the local authorities in terms of collection of household hazardous waste? As we're all aware, obviously, the Waste Framework Directive requires separate collection of household hazardous waste since the 1st of January last year. And I suppose in Ireland, the EPA have been tasked under the Waste Management Act to produce a National Hazardous Waste Management Plan. And they did that for a 6-year period from 2021. And within that, there's a number of recommendations covering areas such as policy and regulation, prevention, collection and treatment, and implementation. And each of the recommendations within the plan is assigned an owner who's responsible for it, whether that be the Department of the Environment, the EPA, the local authorities, and the Regional Waste Management Planning Offices. We have a National Transportation Shipment Office. So there's a number of owners. And as I spoke earlier, back in 2024, the Regional Waste Management Planning Offices prepared the National Waste Management Plan for a Circular Economy on behalf of the local authorities in Ireland as to how local authorities would deal with waste management planning. And as part of that, there was a number of focus areas for different areas. Two of them deal with hazardous waste. Focus Area 10, hazardous waste, and Focus Area 16 on the hazardous waste infrastructure. And they took the recommendations from the EPA National Waste Management Plan in terms of, promotion, in terms of the collection platforms. So I suppose, how do we collect household hazardous waste currently in Ireland? So currently in Ireland, each of the 31 local authorities would have a number of civic amenity sites which they control and manage. And most of those would accept a very limited range of household hazardous waste. Typically, they'd accept paint and waste oils and aerosols. And the cost for the householder, they're typically charged an entry fee into the site, and it ranges from about €5 to €10. And there's certain limits. Every local authority is operates on its own. The charges vary. Some may have limits, maybe for the amount of paint cans they can accept, and they may have a charge above a certain level and that kind of stuff. And I suppose in addition to these civic amenity sites, we also have, and I'll go into more detail, dedicated household hazardous waste collection days. And these days allow for a wide range of hazardous materials to be accepted. Prior to 2024, they were organised by the individual local authorities. So individual local authorities will get funding through the Department of the Environment to organise these days. They would go out, they tender for a collector, they tender for the communications assets. But I suppose with the onset of the requirement from January 2025, the department decided that probably a good idea maybe to do it centrally. And so since 2024, we've organised the Household Hazardous Waste collection days in the various local authorities, and it's organised through the Regional Waste Management Planning Offices. And generally for these days, we've had no charge to date. So it's free to the customers when they come to these days. So I suppose just to explain the coordination model that we've been using. So the Department of Climate, Energy and the Environment, to give them their full title, they in Ireland, they're responsible for the policy oversight, the implementation of the legislation, and they also provide funding. For this model, they provide funding to the Regional Waste Management Planning Offices. So we're ultimately responsible for coordination of the collection days across the country, the procurement of the external contractors, which you can see the external contractors are your hazardous waste collection service provider. We centrally procured for the communications asset and the public relations aspects of it as well. And then we're also responsible for coordinating the communication strategy. Well, we work with the individual local authorities across the country to identify suitable locations. Then the local authorities are responsible for the local promotion of the event through their own channels, and they also assist with the collection days. So we work very closely with the individual local authorities. So I suppose we started this in advance of the Waste Framework Directive requirement, and we ran a pilot to kind of test out this national coordination approach. So in 2024, we had 4 pilot events across our 3 waste regions. We had almost 1,900 customers that availed of the service. We collected 65 tonnes of waste, but 77% of that was paint. We also, as a number of our events, we worked with the Paint Reuse Network here in Ireland, and they attended 3 of our events where they collected almost 2 tonnes of paint that went directly for reuse. And I suppose the cost then, it is very expensive. You're talking about 1,600 per tonne of waste that's collected these days, and it's about €73 per customer, and these are offered free of charge. So I suppose the key learnings from the pilot were there was a need for a coordinated national approach. There's a very strong demand for the service, and we found that particularly in urban areas where we ran the days, we came into a number of traffic management issues, and look, clear communication was critical to the participation. And all these learnings, they helped us to refine We went to do the collections last year. So in 2025 last year, again, it was funded by the Department of Climate, Energy and the Environment. It was centrally coordinated as per the 2024 pilots. And this year, then we went out to procurement. We decided we'd procure the services for a 3-year term. Now, even though we only get funding on a yearly basis from the department, I suppose we were anticipating, because procurement, it's probably the same across, it takes a lot of time. We have to go to the tenders portal, we have to assess them with the waiting periods. So we decided that we'd go out for tender, and we tendered in such a way that it was for 2025 with the possibility of 2026 and 2027 subject to funding. So last year we organised 11 events across the 3 regions, and you can see there from the map of Ireland on the right, the locations were spread across the whole country. So I suppose one of the things that we did find from the pilot was, especially in urban areas, there was a huge demand, and we did find at a couple of events that the traffic management was a huge issue with cars. At one of our events, there was over 600 metres of cars queuing, we anticipated at one time. So I suppose from that we learned that in 2025 that we'd implement a booking system where we anticipated high demand, especially in large urban areas. So we used it for 4 of the 11 events last year. So what we did, we set up a booking system on Eventbrite where customers could go on, book a slot between a particular time, and that way then we were able to effectively manage the traffic, and it worked really well. I suppose it was a problem, obviously, people, because it's free, people book it and then they forget about it, or they just, so about 20% no shows. It also allowed customers to, we have a little survey as well, so it allowed them to complete the survey when they're doing their booking. And I suppose we learned really from our very first event, we didn't make it very clear, or we didn't make it clear enough, that booking was essential. So that was really a key learning. There a lot of people turned up without a booking at our very first event that we had a booking, but we learned and successfully clearly advertising it. And you'll see it in the assets that I'll show there, and you can even see the little red circle there saying booking essential. And it did work very well after that. So then, just moving on to the communication assets, I suppose, as we say, they're key to informing the people about where the event is on, what can be accepted, what cannot be accepted. So you can see there from our right-hand side an example of the communication assets, like 1 day only to drop off your hazardous waste for free. And then here in the little circle saying booking essential, see below. Obviously the time, the date, the location, the EERA code. And then we have a list of materials that we'll accept, clearly listed out as we went to start from the pilot. Each day we learn as we go along. We've added to the list, amended to the list, and we've clear symbols down here at the bottom just to kind of say, okay, if your product has one of these symbols on it, then it's hazardous. And we have a little QR code then to scan so they can book their event, and some other conditions there about the limits in terms of the 10 paint can limit. So we did implement a 10 paint can limit because it's on these days, like the volume of paint is just unbelievable. Like, everybody comes with paint. So we implemented 10 paint can limit for the simple reason we don't want people coming, especially if they have a booking towards the end of the booking slot, and there's no saying, sorry, can't take your paint. So that's where we have to implement it, and we need to be strong on that as well on the day. We also found that a lot of people were bringing on motor oil, and I suppose, so we did put a limit of 25 litres of motor oil per customer as well on the day. People obviously would come sometimes with products without the labels on them. They cannot be accepted on the day. ISWA is our contracted waste collector, so they would give them a card and contact them after the event to see how they can get rid of that waste. And it's obviously strictly limited to householders. And I suppose the communications assets that we use newspaper ads, posters and flyers, the radio ads, social media posts, press releases. And in 2025, it cost about just over €8,000 per event we spent on communication assets. And I suppose the main cost of that, I mean, it is very high, but it's newspapers. Putting ads in newspapers is extremely expensive. Radio ads are also quite expensive, but newspaper ads is the bulk of that kind of cost. And especially, I suppose, in some areas, there'd be maybe 2 or 3, say, local papers circulating where they want to put ads. So this just shows different examples of our communication assets, from our posters, our flyers, our social media posts. And you can see that kind of the red stickers kind of highlighting the main events, kind of, one is closed for lunch, kind of thing. And then there's just so newspaper articles, and there's been very good pickup on the newspaper articles, and we've got a number of radio interviews as well prior to the event. So there is great interest, there's great demand, and when you're on site at these days, the number of people that come up and go, oh, it was great, it was like, gosh, badly needed, I've been looking out for this service for years, kind of thing. So there is huge demand. I suppose as part of the pilot and a part of the survey last year, we did a customer service just to get a feel. If people did a booking, it was the completed survey when they did their booking, or else if there was no booking, we surveyed as many customers as we could when they arrived on the site. And we asked them last year, how far have you travelled and where did you hear about the event? So I suppose just in terms of the 2025, you just see our survey here, 66% of the people travelled less than 10 kilometres. And I suppose that's because most of the events were held in urban areas. Like 26% travelled 10 to 20 kilometres. So people are travelling for these events, you know, and I mean, 10% travelled greater than 20 kilometres. So there is like a huge demand. People are interested. People have, I suppose, hazardous waste built up on their sheds and that kind of stuff. We also asked where did they hear about the event, and you can see there. Sorry, the social media was the largest one at 41%. It's the cheapest, you know, but it really does show that it's, you know, it is the main one, followed by our newspapers and our radio. And I suppose, like, the thing as well is, you know, family and friends is huge as well. The amount of people that come and say, oh, I heard it from my friend or a friend group, or, you know, that kind of thing. But like year on year, social media is the number one, and followed by the newspapers and the radio. So just moving on then to our 2025 days, what we found, as I said, we had 11 events. So there was 3,269 customers availed of the service. We collected 151 tons of hazardous waste. 80% of that was paint. So paint is huge. There was the Paint Reuse Network attended 3 events and collected 1.4 tons of waste this year. Now, I suppose the thing is, last year, obviously, we had 11 events across the country. Some of them were a bit more rural than others. So our customers per event, they range from 124 to 485. And we normally operated the events for a 4-hour period. So it just shows there's a huge range, and it kind of highlights the cost. Then the average cost then was much higher than last year. Now, obviously, the cost of the service provider had increased, but also I suppose the main reason was because of the huge range of customers. And you can see there that the average customer cost was 124 euros last year, but that ranged from 89 up to 225. So it really reflects the number of customers. So you do need to be getting a large number of customers to reduce your cost. And the average cost per tonne there was 2,690. So just in terms, look, that's just graphing the events there. So I can't really see it, so small, but you can see the paint was our main thing, followed by waste oil. So yeah, paint is huge at these events. And so just finally then for this year, again, we've been funded by the Department of Climate, Energy and the Environment. We have centrally coordinated, similar to the last 2 years. We've been up and running. It's a little bit faster. We're starting our first event actually this coming weekend, because we got notified of our funding just about a month or 2 ago. But then at least we have all our tenders. We have our hazardous waste collector. We have our communication assets all tendered for, so we can get going straight away. And I suppose this year, just slightly different. What we are trialling, and it's happening now in June, in 2 weeks' time, we're having a Paint Amnesty Week at a civic amenity site in Carlow. So basically what will happen there is, and you can see the ad there, for 4 days, householders can bring waste paint, like it's a civic amenity site, so they can bring it during their opening hours, but it will be limited to 10 paint cans per customer, and it'll be free of charge. So we just want to see how that kind of idea works. We're doing it in a facility, a civic amenity site that has actually loads of space that can accommodate this kind of activity. We don't want to go to kind of a smaller area. So we'll just see how that goes. We're also kind of speaking to local authorities, and maybe because a lot of the local civic amenity sites accept hazardous waste as it is, and it's something when you're out there talking to the people, it kind of realises that they didn't know that they could bring their paint to their local civic amenity site. So there's a lack of awareness there. So we're going to work with a couple of local authorities this year as well, and just based on communication assets to highlight, did you know you can bring your paint to or your waste oil? And also this year, we're also going to run a survey again this year but we've revised the questions a little bit different this year. So we're going to ask them, did you know that your local, say, civic community site can accept the following hazardous waste, depending on where we're doing the collection? And then we're going to ask them, how do you typically dispose of your waste paint? Are they put it in the general waste bin? Are they put it in the recycling bin? Are they bring it to the civic community site, or are they storing it up in their garage? And so one question then we want to see is like, do you think the hardware stores or shops that sell the paint should take back the waste paint? So it just gives us kind of different information, because I suppose how far you travelled and where you heard about the event, they yielded very similar results in 2024, 2025. So there's probably no need to keep going with the same questions. And so I suppose just finally, just to wrap up, I suppose what we learned, like what works well, is definitely the central coordination. It's saved a lot of time for the individual local authorities, reduces their workload when you have central procurement. We have a standardised communication approach, and we're amending it as we go along. There's clear communication is key, obviously, and it works well. When you clearly tell people they have to book, they will book. And then they have the limits on certain waste types. If we didn't have the limit on paint cans, we'd be closing these collection days within an hour or two of opening them. And that obviously leads to negative publicity and bad feeling and that kind of thing. So I suppose the challenges are identifying suitable locations to maximise the participation. That's really what we saw last year when we ran 11 events. So this year's events, they are targeted in more urban areas. But saying that, we'd also think about how we work with the more rural areas, whether it's paint amnesty weeks or days or collection points as well. We have to look at all areas, can't just concentrate in the urban areas. Look, addressing waste paint is a huge challenge because it's 80% of the waste that's collected. And obviously the cost, which is averaging out at about €124 per customer. So it's a huge burden on the state. And just finally, just to kind of, I suppose, plug what we have here, the Regional Waste Management Planning Offices have worked with local authorities and the department, obviously, to produce mywaste.ie. So it's Ireland's official guide to managing all our wastes. There's information there for householders, commercial premises, and that kind of stuff. We obviously advertise our Household Hazardous Waste collection days there. It's actually very, very handy, say, particularly for radio ads. You can just go to mywaste.ie for more details of the collection day. It's prominent information available there. There's information about how you minimise your household hazardous waste, guides, greener cleaning guides, and that kind of stuff. So there's a whole range of information. People can go in there and they can search how they get rid of a particular waste type. They can put the item in there and it'll tell them how to do it. So that's kind of where I'm at. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Carol, for taking us through. I'm thinking that when you talk about the limit of the 10 paint cans, it's also probable that as it's free, you could have the risk that you might get some, I don't know, professional, let's say, operators who. So I guess that also covers that risk to some extent. But I'm just wondering to get your thoughts on something, because one aspect is the fact that it's free, so you can bring your household hazardous waste for free. On the other hand, compared to civic amenity sites, you're offering a moment, an occasion, right? Something that you can actually communicate on. So you can say, look, this is happening. And that in a way just gives an incentive for people to do something with their household hazardous waste. And so I'm just wondering, do you think the fact that it's free is like the big motivation, or is it more the fact that with a collection day, it gives you a great opportunity to just communicate on this very specific waste stream, and so therefore it kind of gets people to those places, right? I mean, or do you think the free aspect is definitely the key? Yeah,
free is huge. It's like, I suppose there's questions, should it be free? There's questions, should we be charging nominal charge to customers? I mean, it's amazing when you're out there on the days and you're meeting the people, it's free. They'll go, oh, it's free. Like, people love free things. And I suppose just one example of that is we did a collection day last year in a civic community site, and someone came the day before and they brought their paint cans, and they said to the operator, oh, I saw somewhere that it was free to bring it. And the guy said, and that's tomorrow actually. And he brought the paint cans away. It was only going to cost him €2 or €3. He brought the paint cans away with him and came back the next day because it was free. So yeah, look, I mean, it is a great opportunity. It does generate conversations, generates talks. Having that list of items, the amount of people you come and they have actually like on their phone, or they have a copy of the newspaper going, I went out and I looked to see what I had. So I suppose just people to understand what is, and when we do radio ads or radio interviews, it's kind of like, what do you mean by hazardous waste? What is household hazardous waste? To give examples, because, it's kind of to relate it back to what we have at home under our kitchen sinks or our garage and that kind of thing. But yeah, look, free, people love free, without a doubt. I suppose, yeah, there's arguments, should it be free? Should there be nominal charge? But at the moment, it is free. Whether that will continue or not, waits to be seen.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to this point on the true cost, right? And so you might need to have an incentive at the early stage, but ultimately it will still cost something somewhere. So okay, but brilliant. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
We'll come back to you later then for the discussion. And I propose then that we move to our next presentation case study with Stephanie Paintith, senior consultant at the Association of Austrian Waste Management Companies. And Stephanie will be talking about another type of household hazardous waste. There are various categories. They don't all fall under quite the same regulations sometimes, but Stephanie will be talking about a national campaign to take back lithium-ion batteries. So please, Stephanie, over to you.
Thank you. So, yes, perfect. So, hi everyone, my name is Stephanie. I work for FÖP, the Association of Austrian Waste Management Companies, and I have the honor today to tell you a little bit about a pilot project we did back in 2023 to try to encourage consumers to return their old batteries. I actually just noticed that I forgot to add the standard introduction slide, so I'm just going to tell you on the audio track a little bit about FÖP. We are the voluntary representation of commercial operating waste management companies in Austria. We have been around for over 40 years. We represent around 260 member companies on the national level as well as the European level. And maybe just for you, out of interest, the Austrian waste management sector comprises about 30,000 people in roughly 3,000 companies, municipal as well as commercial. And we have an annual revenue as a sector of around 9 billion euros. Wow. I have been with FÖP for 1.5 years only, so I was not part of that pilot project, but I hope I can answer any questions there might be anyways. So in the beginning, maybe a little bit about why we actually did that project and why we spent money on it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the hazard part, but just because I think it's important to know why we did this, and also because we have some very fresh data on that subject that I think might be interesting. So in Austria, we have a growing challenge basically with the correct disposal of batteries, and especially lithium batteries. Growing because the sale of batteries is increasing every year, and especially the rate of lithium batteries is increasing. So currently we have around 50% of all batteries, device batteries, are lithium based, and that number was just around 30% a couple of years back. And of course that makes sense because lithium batteries, they are far lighter, they have a higher energy density, so it's just sensible to put them in a lot of products, from smartphones to toys, etc., etc. And so while the put on market number is increasing every year, the collection rates in Austria have actually been stagnant for a lot of years now. We hover around 50% collection rate for batteries. So it's been between 47 and 53 just in 2024. But the number for the collection rate for lithium batteries is far lower. Since 2018, we have been collecting lithium batteries separately. And we are now around, as of 2024, around 70.2% for the collection rate of lithium batteries, which is a stark contrast to how the number of lithium batteries is increasing. Part of this can be attributed to the fact that we do not quite have the right collection or the calculating methods for the collection rate, because lithium batteries have a far longer lifetime. But that's not just the whole story. And we also have to increase those collection rates. The EU target sets us to 73 by 2030. And we think that closing this quite huge gap requires a new approach in consumer engagement. That's the very fresh data that I was mentioning before. We actually just recently did a study with the Technical University of Leoben in Styria in Austria on batteries found in residual waste. So over the last couple of months, the university analyzed around 10 tons of residual waste in Austria. And what we found was, I think, actually quite drastic. So in those tons, we found 48 batteries per ton of residual waste, and over 8 lithium-based batteries per ton of residual waste. We lastly did a study like this in 2016, and we're now seeing a 4-fold increase in lithium batteries in residual waste compared to 2016. So 300% increase over 10 years. And if we round it up to the residual waste that we have annually in Austria, that's around 17 million lithium-based batteries in residual waste. So basically 17 million possible little fires, because we know that improperly disposed lithium batteries pose serious fire risk in the waste streams. And they're also really valuable raw materials that is lost by this. And mind you, this is just the residual waste. We also find a lot of lithium batteries, for example, with e-cigarettes in the plastic waste stream, or with singing greeting cards in the paper stream. We also had an interesting part of this study was that the students analyzed one garbage truck, and in that single garbage truck, we found around 28 lithium batteries. So while our facilities are now quite well equipped with fire detection and fire suppression, the garbage trucks are mostly not yet. So that's also a lot of fire hazards. Yeah, also because I guess pictures say more than words, just some dramatic pictures from last year, for example. We had quite huge fires in the waste management industry. These are just like fires that are covered by mainstream media. Part of that study we did with the University of Leoben is also a long time fire monitoring in the waste management industry. And as you can see on the graph on the bottom, the fire incidents have been steadily increasing year by year, where the last 2 years are like even a more drastic outlier. And this again is just the tip of the iceberg, because those are the fires that are reported in media and where the data is publicly available. So our companies report up to 6 fires daily that are of course put out by their systems and by the people working there. And this data is not represented in that graph. So say we have an even bigger problem. Yeah, and so that's why we try, I don't know if you can also just see half of the slide, because for me it only shows the top bottom, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So we see a couple of possible solutions to that problem. One, of course, is awareness raising. We do have a national campaign in Austria, which is called Her mit Leer, which has been running from 2021 to 2024 and has now just been renewed for another 3 years. So that company is responsible, or that project is responsible for awareness raising, and they're also responsible for like putting collection boxes in grocery stores, for example. We can also try to make the return process for consumers much more convenient, for example, by installing more collection points. We have around 1,000 municipal waste collection points in Austria, and we can return batteries at grocery stores or at stores that sell electronic products. And this is always a 0 to 1 return, so you don't have to buy a new product to return the batteries. We are also increasing those collection points, hopefully this year, with amendment to our V directive, so that we can also return small electronic devices with batteries in them at small stores, which has not been possible previously. Also, without the need to purchase something beforehand. But like as I showed you in the first slide, we have been doing those two things for quite a couple of years, and still the collection rates remain at a quite steady and low level. So we sort of think we've reached a glass ceiling with those methods. That's why we looked into incentive project, because we think that it makes sense to give value to waste. And as we see with, for example, beverage packaging deposit return systems, those systems can help drastically increase collection rates. So now a little bit about the project. It was called Pet Incentive. It ran from mid-April to the end of November in 2023. We did the project in Feldbach in Styria, which is a town of about, I think, 30,000 people. We had 8 company partners that were part of the project. It was, for example, the PRO for we in Austria. We had DigiCycle, which is a company that develops an app for incentivation and also information for consumers. We had a couple of waste management companies as a partner, and we also had insurance companies as partners. And then we had 12 participating retail stores in the Feldbach region, which were mostly electronic and sports stores where they sell products with lithium batteries. And the main tool that we used for that project was the DigiCycle mobile app, which I'm going to show you a little bit later on. So, of course, our core objective was to increase the collection rate of lithium batteries through consumer incentives, and also to document and learn from that project to see if incentivation generally works, to see if a digital solution works, and to see how that project helps us to develop similar solutions in the future in Austria. So how it actually worked. In the beginning of the project and through all of it, we informed the citizens of Feldbach through local media posts, as well as the participating retailers. So we had flyers and posters at the store that informed the customers that if they buy a new product with a lithium battery in it, they can return an old battery, and they will basically receive a voucher valued at 10 euros for that. That second part is grayed out for a reason I will tell you later on. But basically, in the beginning, you then would, when purchasing a new device or a new lithium batteries, you would get a voucher with a unique QR code sticker. Then you would go home, stick that, find an old battery. I will also tell you, so the batteries that were eligible for this project were basically fist-sized lithium batteries. So we were looking for batteries that you usually see in power tools or gardening tools. We did not, in this project, include small batteries like the AAA batteries, for example. That was all explained on the flyer, on the posters, as well as on the website that we made for the project and in the app. So then you would stick your QR code sticker on an old battery and return that battery to that retailer, to a different retailer in that region that was also participating, or to the municipal waste center in Feldbach. Then you would use the app, the DigiCycle app, which was an app that was existing previously, but we sort of developed further for this project. You would use that app to scan your own code, and the staff member at the retail center or at the municipal center would also scan a code to basically confirm the return of an old battery. With this done, you would collect coins in an app. Basically, you get 1,000 coins for one returned battery, and then you could redeem those coins for a coupon, which was valued at 10 euro, which was called 8 cities voucher, which was basically which is a voucher that already exists in that region that you can use for retail stores around the Feldbach area. You can see at the bottom, that's basically how the app looked. So you had your QR code scanning, you had your point redemption, and then you could collect in the app store those points for your voucher. That was all existing. So that process in the app was existing previously for different projects, but we then specifically designed it for this project. I think we're going to post in the chat also the link to the website that we built for this project. You can have a look. Unfortunately, it's only in German. It's quite a long time ago. So, I mean, I know there's an English button, but that sends you to a different site. But basically, the website tells you the process again, also shows all the retailers that are participating and where they are, and also has a small little FAQ on the bottom. So what we also did in the project, so we wanted to try out a few things. So basically, mid of the project or towards the end of it, we had a little change in strategy to see if we could increase the return rate even further. So before, as I mentioned, you had to go in the store, you had to buy a new product, and then you would get the voucher to return an old battery. So basically a one-to-one return system. What we did with that change in strategy, we basically removed that purchase barrier because in our analysis, we saw that not a lot of people at that time from April to August were buying new products, and also they weren't sometimes probably informed at the stores on this project. So what we did, we removed the purchase barrier, we sent the information and the voucher to all citizens in Feldbach by mail, and basically I told them you can bring back an old batteries to the retail stores or to the municipal waste center without the need to buy a new product first. And that change in strategy, as you can see, quite drastically increased the number of returns, so that by end of November, we then reached our goal, which was around 500 returned batteries. We came up to, I think, 450 then in the end. Part of that project was also then we also tried a little gamification aspect with it, that into all participants, we would raffle a spa voucher, I think valid at 200 euros. And we also promised that if we would reach our goal, we would donate to a youth center in the Feldbach area, which we did in the end. So yeah, so I guess the results for us from our project was that firstly, we saw a lot of interest in the project. We had very good national media coverage during the project as well as afterwards. And we definitely saw an increase in return in that time in the Feldbach area. So we compared the returns in Feldbach compared to surrounding municipalities. In Feldbach, we saw a 32% increase in returned batteries at that time, where in surrounding municipalities where they were not part of that incentive program, we only saw an increase of 5%. I think we also saw incentives work as well in theory, because we did a survey in the Feldbach region where we firstly asked people how many old batteries they have lying around in households, which the survey showed that in general people have around 10 products with lithium batteries or batteries in them. I think newer studies show that we are up to 20 products right now. And that study also showed that around 70% of people would collect or return more batteries and dispose them properly if they were rewarded for doing so. I guess, no surprise. What we did since then, or how we went on from this little project. So for us, that project showed that incentivization works. It also showed for us that digital supported way to basically incentivize people for returning batteries works as well. The project that we had was a little bit too complicated with the QR code sticker and then redeeming it in the app and then getting a voucher. So what we have been looking into since then is more of an AI image-based recognition method, for example, that should make the process a little bit easier. And we're calling this basically a cashback system. It's similar to a deposit return system, but has a couple of differences, because we know that batteries with their long lifetime are not exactly perfect for a deposit return system. When you think of the beverage packaging deposit return system, you have to keep a coupon, and if you have to, for example, keep a coupon for 7+ years lifetime of your battery, you would probably lose or forget that. So the cashback system basically works a little bit different. It works similar to the pilot project we did in Feldbach. So basically, you can turn equivalent or any other old battery you have back home and then get rewarded for it. We have been working on a concept like this for the last years. This year, we also got support from it from the scientific side, so that we're also seeing if such a cashback project could also be economically feasible in Austria. So yeah, that's it on our little project. And if you have any questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much. You have some interest from Wales. So Olga Andrianova is open to collaborate, and she also speaks German.
That's perfect.
That's already a start. So you have a partner right there.
Oh, nice.
Maybe one question or a reflection, right? Because obviously you're talking about here a category of products that is regulated separately from household hazardous waste in the sense of the requirements under the Waste Framework Directive. But ultimately, very similar to the previous presentation, there is some sort of an incentive mechanism. So in the case of Ireland, it was a free collection day. In your case, there's a kind of an incentive to bring back your battery. So that clearly seems to be a lever, okay, the price factor on collection. But broader than that, I'm just wondering, right, because we accept a certain number of hazards into our homes for various reasons, to perform key functions, right? Cleaning, painting, whatever, gardening, and then obviously powering various devices, okay? But yet on the waste stream, all of this is going into various pieces of different regulation, which means that the governance of these hazardous waste streams is separate behind the scenes for households, but it means they're having to deal with lots of different systems, right? Different places where they need to go for different types of hazardous waste that they all find in their homes at the end of the day. So for them, it's like, this is just a household waste. I mean, I'm not aware of all the various pieces of regulation that require me to separate this and go here, separate that and go here. And ultimately, they all have something in common. They are all hazardous, okay? And so when we're talking about communicating, just a reflection, right? But do you think that the fact that there are so many different regulations that are separating these various hazards into various compartments, do you think that helps the waste management side to just be able to communicate to people, be careful, the same hazards that you bring into your homes are hazards when they leave your homes as waste? Just in general, as a kind of a overarching message, do you think that split regulations make it very difficult to communicate that very simple message across the board? And what can be done to address that? I don't know. It's just like a thought. As you were explaining your project, I was thinking, I'd be keen to get your reflection on that.
No, of course, I think that whenever you have different regulations, it makes it much more difficult for your average consumer to know what's going on. We saw that when we had, for example, different regulations in Austria, and Austria is not that large of a country, to return non-hazardous waste, which is the beverage or the plastic waste. So we had different regulations in every region of Austria, which of course we changed that 2 years back, and we saw a huge difference in collection rates. I think for hazardous waste, especially for batteries, we see that now there's a lot of communication effort to people that those products are also dangerous at home, because we see also an increasing number of fires related to lithium batteries in households. We had quite some tragic events in the last weeks as well. But then we also have, with batteries, we have the problem that many people don't actually know that the products they have at home contain hazardous, or they are hazardous. For example, for batteries, you have with the vapes or toys. For example, I saw a lollipop that actually contains a lithium battery. So I don't think a lot of people know that that actually is a hazardous product, and that's why it lands up in residual waste. But also for Austria, in the municipal waste collection centers, you can bring back all types of hazardous waste. And at the center, if there are staff members there, they will tell you where specifically, for example, expose of batteries and where expose of, I don't know, oils, medicines, whatever. Yeah. But in general, definitely, the easier you make it and the more uniform you make it, the better you're going to reach your consumers, I guess.
Okay, brilliant. And have you question from Olga here? Have you measured levels of public awareness on lithium batteries, and did you have all the risks that lithium batteries can pose, and whether you had any sort of educational activities around or in addition to the marketing ones or the incentive ones?
On that project, I don't know. So. Is there a question in the chat? No. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, like it's because obviously there's
I mean, I do not have, for example, we have that general public awareness campaign called Her mit Leer. I do not have numbers on that, how much, for example, that increases public awareness, which are numbers I would be actually very interested in, because we do not see a representation of the awareness campaigns in the collection rates, but maybe we see some, if we do a survey, we see a number, just a general awareness, if that's raising. I do not have any information on that. I would also be very interested. I think for our survey, after the project, we did a little survey as well as how many people in that region heard of that project specifically and were informed probably. We saw that the number was not as high as we expected. So we also learned from that how to basically have an information campaign in the future, how to better reach our customers or consumers.
I mean, it's always a challenge with a pilot project, right?
Yep.
I mean, yeah, it's not an easy one.
It's a pilot for a reason.
It's a pilot.
You try.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Stay with us. And I propose then that we move to our next presentation. So that's coming from Portugal with Mario Ramos, Assistant Professor at the Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering at the Nova School of Science and Technology in Lisbon. And you have put together a piece of research on what you see as being the main levers and perceptions of citizens around the separation of household hazardous waste. So very, very keen to hear some of the results from your research, Mario. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. Do I still have 15 minutes or do you want me to cut some information?
You have 15 minutes. Go for it. No problem.
Okay. Okay, it's here. So, good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to contribute to this project. And thank you very much for this invitation to be part of this event today. What I would like to do in this presentation is to share the main findings from our research on how citizens perceive and manage household hazardous waste and reflect on what this means for improving separate collection systems. But before getting there, allow me please a few words about my institution. So I work at Nova University Lisbon. It's a Portuguese public university composed of 9 schools. And I work at Nova School of Science and Technology. I am an assistant professor here in waste management within this Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering. I am also a researcher at Mare Novo. It's part of the Marine and Environmental Science Center, which is a multidisciplinary research center disposed across Portugal. So, with that context in place, the starting point of this work was the European legal framework, of course, under which member states are required to ensure the separate collection of this type of waste by 2025. In Portugal, this requirement was incorporated into our national waste law in 2020, coming into force in 2021. And it was in that context that the study was developed in 2022 during what I will call the pre-implementation phase, with the aim of understanding how citizens perceive and act about this type of waste. Jean-Paul said that at the beginning. So hazardous household waste continues to be found here in Portugal, both in mixed municipal waste and in the separately collected fractions, as shown in physical characterization campaigns carried out by municipal systems. We have 23 municipal systems here in Portugal. And at the same time, it is my opinion that the implementation at municipal level remains quite fragmented, and we still have limited evidence on what actually works. So a lot of work has to be done here. To support the design of our research, of course, in this academic perspective, we first looked at our other studies, and maybe I will cut some information here. But we looked at the importance of practical conditions such as how easy it's to people to access collection points and how convenient the system is for everyday life. Social aspects like awareness, raising awareness, social norms, and risk perception. And this is extremely important for this context, the risk perception. And we also look to the practical barriers and opportunities like storage space at home, system design, and accessibility of disposal options. And altogether, this and of course, a lot of other insights helped us to shape the research approach. For the empirical part of the study, the municipality of Almada was selected as the case study. So Almada is a municipality located in the Lisbon metropolitan area, and it has a high population density. So even higher than Lisbon metropolitan area itself. The municipality, just for a brief context, the municipality is part of the Amarsul waste management system. Amarsul is the name of this entity, this waste management system, which covers 8 other municipalities. You can see that on these slides. For waste management, in general, the responsibilities are shared. So the municipality handles mixed municipal waste collection, and the Marsul is responsible for the separate collection, the sorting and treatment of waste with all the facilities for that. The system is mainly based on street containers, usually within 100 meters from buildings. And we also have these civic community centers or drop-off municipal centers and on-demand services for bulky waste, green waste, construction waste from do-it-yourself construction activities in private households. However, at the end, however, in 2022, during our study, there was still no dedicated system for household hazard wastes. So, as part of the preparation of the study, interviews were conducted with stakeholders from the surrounding municipalities. I don't have time to get on this part of the study today because it's a lot of information. But we had a questionnaire applied to the residents of Almada municipality. Given the limited resources we had at the time and in this academic context, a convenient sample was employed, and in this context, the findings are not intended to be representative. And we try to answer and to understand these 3 aspects: knowledge and risk perception about the products, and knowledge and behaviors regarding the management of the products and the wastes as well, and perceptions and opinions of the participants towards a separate collection system. A statistical approach was then applied based on one key question of the questionnaire, measuring the likelihood of using a separate collection system for this type of wastes. This allowed us to distinguish between two groups, those with a lower likelihood and those with a higher likelihood of using such a system. And in total, we received 275 responses. So moving on now to the results. I will start by looking with you at how people perceive the hazardousness of household products. So I will give you just some time to look at this information that you have here. It's a lot of information, but I will try to highlight the main topics, okay? What stands out immediately here is that carbon herbicides and pesticides are generally seen as the most hazardous products. So, and I can also add this information to you. Across all categories, people who are more likely to use a separate collection system tend to perceive higher levels of risk. Okay, this is important. And when we look closely to the results, the differences are important for these types of waste. Paints, solvents, car maintenance products, varnishes, and oil-based paints, because we have statistically significant differences here between the two groups. And this is important because it suggests that perceptions of risk are not uniform across the population, and communication strategies may need to reflect that. So we may need to look at these results and understand people perceive the risk in different ways. If we look to the perceived risks more broadly, the most common concern is clearly accidents involving children and pets. And I think this is obvious for us, right? But when we compare the two groups studied, a difference becomes visible. Again, those more likely to use a separate collection system tends to think more about environmental risks such as soil and water contamination or impacts on waste recyclability. And from our perspective, this difference is again important when thinking about how to design the systems and the communication strategies. Looking now at storage behavior, both groups report similar practices, mainly using designated storage spaces at home. However, here I will highlight some of the data. Those more likely to use a separate collection system show slightly stronger adoption of safer practices such as ventilation or protective surfaces. It's in orange on the bottom of the graphic. On the other hand, in blue, those who are less likely to use a separate system are more concerned about not mixing these products with foods and about keeping them out of the reach of children. So the results follow, of course, a trend observed previously that are reinforced here. When we ask people what makes a product hazardous, there are no stronger differences between the groups, no statistically significant differences between them. And most people focus on toxicity, flammability, and explosiveness. And this suggests a rather limited understanding of the hazardous characteristics. So on a complementary way to this graphic, we looked at whether respondents check product labels and found that this behavior is only moderate overall, although slightly higher among those likely to use a separate collection system. And we assessed also the knowledge of hazard pictograms and found that it is quite weak as well. So taking all together this information, this points to a clear need to consolidate literacy on these topics. Let's see another perspective of this study here. We move to the management of small quantities of hazardous products and participants were allowed to select more than one option regarding their practices. You can see the options here of the questionnaire, okay? And overall, most people report appropriate behaviors about the small quantities of the products, okay? And it includes, for example, taking products to municipal drop-off centers, authorized collection points, keeping them for future use, or something like that. However, when we look specifically, not to the products, but for empty packaging, differences become much more evident, and respondents mainly choose practices that are considered incorrect. Okay? So less appropriate behaviors include placing packaging in mixed waste or using recycling bins without proper separation, and a lot of other options that you see here. But this is important, and we have statistically significant differences here between the groups. When it comes to this part of the preferred solutions to manage this type of waste, both groups show a consistent pattern. The clear preferences is for fixed straight containers, seen as convenient and easily accessible, and mobile and curbside system are generally less popular. The only real difference that we have here is that those more likely to use a separate collection system are more open to returning waste at places like service station or supermarkets. Okay, this is the difference here. If we look to what people consider important for a successful system, the most important factor is information, especially knowing where to dispose these wastes. Convenience and accessibility come next, followed by information about hazardous products and awareness campaign. Overall, health risks tend to be prioritized, although environmental concerns are stronger among those more likely to use a separate collection system, as we have seen before. What this tells us is that communication matters, but it needs to match how people actually perceive the risk. Even within the group, it's what we can see here in this slide, even within the group that recognize a good solution in the separate waste collection system, awareness campaigns about risk are considered important, especially when compared with the other group. And from these main findings, I can draw some recommendations from this academic perspective. I was invited for this academic perspective. So, systems should be built around fixed and accessible infrastructure, supported by clear information on where and how to dispose this type of waste. Mobile collection systems, such as the one recently introduced in Almada municipality, the case study, it's the first image on the slides, can still play a role, but it's only part of the solution. Again, on my opinion, okay? And you have another solution for a retail store on the second image in Almada. Communication, of course, it's also essential, particularly around hazard labels, risk interpretation, and the correct handling of both products and packaging. And it's very important for the empty packaging, as I tried to explain before. So the key point for me here is the alignment between system design and the real citizen behavior. Because of course, in waste management, we have a lot of laws. We just have to plan things, taking the perception of people in consideration. So to conclude, the findings presented here by me here are based on this article that where you can find more details and complementary information. And this work was developed within a master dissertation of Catarina Pereira, shown on the right side of this slide, under the supervision of Professor Graça Martinho and myself. So thank you very much for your attention, and again for this opportunity, for this invitation. And of course, I'm now happy to take any questions from John Paul or other people in this room. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Mario. I mean, I think it's it's useful to have some reference points here, because I think with the introduction of this legislation, what we're seeing is that it may not have fundamentally changed a separate collection, because there were, it seems, some kind of a system, for collection, but we're struggling to get fixed references, right? So it's quite useful to get your piece of research. I would have a couple of questions on some of the drivers you pointed out. Just one quick question from Sarah in the chat. So when you were talking about the packaging in your case study, are you talking about empty packaging, or is it like that people are bringing back products? So they're bringing back the packaging with the product in it.
No. The first case I presented, it was the packaging with products inside the packaging, a little quantity of product inside the packaging. But when the second case, it was about empty packaging. And we have a problem there because people don't recognize the hazardousness of empty packaging as well as the packaging with product inside. So this is important, in my opinion, to design a system and to raise awareness of people about not only about the products, but about the empty packaging.
Right. Yeah, because this has been also a point of discussion for us, because obviously when you're returning a hazardous waste, you're not returning a sort of a liquid in your hand, right? I mean, it's going to be in some sort of a container, and so the way the container will be managed compared to the substance in it is also like part of our reflections in this project, right?
Yes, I didn't have time, Jean-Paul, but you have different options of responses to in the questionnaire, and we understood that people try to do different things about the product, and when the product still exists in the packaging, people try to keep to storage these products to use them later. They give these products to other people or something like that. Okay, but when you have the empty packaging, people don't want to have empty packaging at home. Okay, so they want to do something, and usually they put this empty packaging on the street containers that we have for packaging, and maybe we don't want that for specific types of packaging. So we need to inform people, because even for packaging in general, not for this kind of product, the contamination here in Portugal, it's extremely higher in these type of street containers. So people need to understand that we have a financial flow of these extended producer responsibility. They don't understand that. So they just think, okay, this is for packaging, maybe I can put plastic inside the container. So we have this type of contamination, and of course, household hazard products play an important role here, because you said it represents around 1% in the physical campaigns that we have in Portugal. We have differences between the mixed waste and the separated collected fractions, of course, but it plays a role because it can contaminate the other wastes. So, of course, we have now the deposit and return systems and all of that, but we still have the street collection. So we need to take attention on this point and to raise awareness of people and to design the solutions to what people want, not to what we think people want.
Perfect. Thank you, Mario. And I think we can bring Carol and Stephanie back in for the last few minutes. We can still address a couple of questions. I mean, in your points, Mario, you referenced in particular, convenience and accessibility. So that's in relation to the system design, information, and obviously then identification of these products. I didn't see much, or I didn't see anything specific on this sort of price-related incentive, and whether or not the cost of bringing back these types of waste can be a barrier. And so I'm just wondering, as a question, but also for Carol and Stephanie, maybe to reflect on what you saw from Mario. I mean, is that still a driver? Nevertheless, is that something that might even supersede some of these other elements, Mario?
Okay, this is a difficult question, but I will try to answer, saying that for me, being part of raising awareness for so long, and we don't see a lot of results about that. I believe that, for example, economic instruments or incentivization are plays an important role about waste management. Okay, so the deposited refund system, paying for a lightweight plastic bag or something like that, it can give us better results than just raising awareness of people. Of course, we have to combine this because the social sciences tell us this, and we try to apply this to waste management. It's not like wastewater treatment. No, about waste management, we have to think, we have to understand people, and we have to understand how to make people to behave in the way we want. So economic instruments, or to pay, or a deposit refund system or something similar, I think it is extremely important. About the design of the research, this academic research, when we employ this type of questionnaire, we don't like to put together questions about, do you want to pay? When we want to perceive in the first place the opinions of people about the system, because people usually they don't understand if we put the two things together. It is our experience from past studies that it's not convenient to put all things together, to ask people if they want to pay for a system. In first place, we have to try to understand, do you want to engage with this system? Do you feel comfortable with this kind of solution? What type of awareness do you need to understand how this works, or to help you to better understand? Then on the next stage, we begin to ask, okay, how much do you feel comfortable to pay about this solution, because we have costs with this, and we try to introduce the cost on this part of the system. Or do you feel comfortable with the deposit refund system or something similar? It is our experience, but of course it is a limitation of the study I presented here, because we did ask to the participants about the costs, and we saw that on the other presentations, so maybe they can add something here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to get maybe a reaction from Carol. I mean, given that you also surveyed, and got some feedback, if you recognize some of these results also in Portugal, or if you have an opinion on that.
Yes, yeah, I suppose, look, definitely people are driven by producer responsibility schemes, are successful in, here in Ireland, we have our deposit return system for plastic bottles and that kind of stuff. And it is increasing, people doing the right thing when they're getting in terms of recycling. And I suppose lots of the time, say, particularly with paint here in Ireland, it's a huge issue. And maybe it's down to maybe more producer responsibility. The producer to put it on the market has to take responsibility for it as well, and some kind of instruments. But it's a bit like when you buy your electrical equipment here, you pay an environmental charge that goes towards the correct disposal of that when it comes to end of life. Yeah, and I suppose, look, awareness is key. There's obviously, a good core of our people want to do the right thing, and that's obvious when they come to our collection days. I suppose, look, there's a bit of confusion about what you do with certain waste types, and that's why we have the mywaste.ie, try to steer people towards that. But yeah, look, I mean, it's awareness, and then it's also getting people to do the right thing. And if it's cost prohibitive, they probably won't do it. So it's kind of, if it's back at the producer responsibility, when you actually buy your product, you pay an extra charge to cover its end of life cost. It's probably the ideal way to go.
Yeah, there's also a question from Vanya. So on the labels, right? So we see products have hazardous products have labels. and these labels communicate the toxicity or the hazards to the user, but it's really the use phase that is targeted, right? It's basically telling people, be careful in the way you're using this product. These same products will end up in, or should end up in household hazardous waste because they're hazardous, and in households. But so how is this communicating? So we have these labels on the use. These are meant to communicate how you're disposing also of these products, but it's not quite that communication, right? I mean, on the other hand, we're seeing that there are evolutions on the way packaging is communicating information to consumers, with having similar labels on the packaging and on the waste receptacles to basically say, where you see this on a waste receptacle is where you see the same label or pictogram on a packaging. And so I'm just wondering, the toxicity element and these very clear pictograms that have been developed for many years on the use phase, are they also, do you think, communicating on the waste phase sufficiently?
Well, there's definitely a lot of work to be done. It's definitely an area that needs to be looked at closer, because like we do have labels on my waste labels that for say non-hazardous products, and that they're coming in more and more products. Suppliers have signed up to them saying, this is recyclable, to put in a recycling bin. So that's definitely an area that needs to be looked at more closely as to what exactly kind of information you give on products in terms of how to dispose of them at the end of their life. And
maybe for Stephanie, a reflection, because there's also a question in relation to Greece, where it's saying that empty containers of hazardous waste are communicated as let's say non-toxic. Let's put it that way. And so you can place those containers in the public recycling bins, or I guess the collection streams for that packaging material, I'm assuming. Question is, what do you think about that? And I'm just wondering whether for Austria you might have a view on that.
I'm not the expert on this, to be fair. My colleague at FEP knows that way better than I do. I think if I remember correctly, we just had an amendment, for example, for pesticide bottles in agriculture. But I'm sorry, I can't answer that now. I can definitely ask my colleague or get back to you on that and how we deal with it in Austria.
Okay. Yeah, it could be interesting to understand how different countries approach the empty containers or empty-ish containers of hazardous waste. Mario, do you have a view on that? On that recommendation?
Yes, I can add something to that. I try to pass the message that people don't look to labels. Most of people don't look to labels. And we have a lot of different pictograms and labels on packaging. So it's kind of confusing to people to understand all of them and understand what to do with these different kinds of labels and all of this information. So we asked this in our research to the participants, and the majority of them, they just don't check the labels. And apart from that, when we ask about, okay, you have here a pictogram about toxicity, I don't remember the specific pictogram, and the majority, they also did recognize the type of risk that we have there. Okay, so we have to raise awareness, or maybe we have to change this type of communication that we have with citizens, because they don't feel, I think they don't feel comfortable with the system as it is. Also here in Portugal, this has to be with the terminology of hazardousness, the legal terminology, because it's only hazardous when we have a specific substance in a specific quantity amount. And if we don't have the substance inside the packaging, most of the cases we can put in Portugal in the yellow container for packaging of plastic and metal and composites. So, and this is a little bit confusing for some people as well. So this system, it's not as I said before, as easy to use as for the wastewater, for example. So it's more confusing and people need more time, more information, and we need to modulate these separate collection systems with instruments, allowing us to just understand what people want and give what people want, okay? And give a good system with a good image. It's important. People like a good image. They don't like equipments that are vandalized. So all of this, it's important to a good separate collection system.
On this, I mean, maybe just a final word to go back to Carol on creating this sort of awareness around a system with these collection days, and given the fact that you have, you know, queues coming to these very specific events, do you feel these collection days give you opportunities to do more than just collect household hazardous waste? Are you able to build on site around these collection days something else around awareness raising and kind of recycling culture, and are you able to use that space to do extra things, or is that something you're thinking about doing moving forwards?
Yeah, I suppose on the day itself, it is very much on dealing with customers when they come to get them through, to get their waste taken off. But I suppose the communication assets around before the event, during the event, like there's radio interviews, there's even on the advertisements that we give, if it's not a booking system, we have a QR code there that brings them to My Waste and on managemywaste.ie. We do have a chance when we're doing the survey to actually speak to people, you know, just about their awareness of the products. And it's particularly, that's where we got the information that people weren't aware of what can be taken at local civic community sites as it is. I suppose a lot of people just think of hazardous waste and automatically thinking of all their paint, you know, and just trying to get them to think beyond that. But I mean, it definitely gets conversation going anywhere you get a bit of media publicity, whether it be on the papers, on our press releases, radio interviews and that kind of stuff. But on the day itself, you know, it is great to actually talk to the people. It's, you know, very interesting. A lot of people would say, I just didn't think it was just kind of paint I thought I could bring, you know, so it is. You know, you really get to talk to the people on the ground.
Yeah, and when you listen to politicians in campaigns, you know, at the end of the day, door to door, you know, like actual real contact is one of the key levers, you know, for campaigning. Yeah. So, you know, any occasion you have to actually speak to someone in a way, it's the best thing to do. But we've come to the end of our time. So thank you so much, Mario, Carol, Stephanie, for having been with us, for having shared these very enlightening presentations and case studies. I hope you've found all of this interesting, and you can take some information with you back to your various local situations that you're dealing with. Stay connected with us. So we have our website, hazardsout.eu, where you will be able to find the recordings of all the previous episodes, as well as the presentations and the joint declaration, as I mentioned at the beginning. Help us raise awareness on this. We'll be back later this year with a new episode, so watch out for that. And you know, have a think. Should we act on price? Make collection as easy and convenient as possible. Raise awareness on hazards. Should we be doing, you know, all of this at once? Probably. Good luck and enjoy the summer. Take care. Thanks for being with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.